You know why an NBA rebuild is so dang hard? Aaron Gordon, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and Malik Monk. I'll explain next on Locked on Jazz. Bum 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 bum.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I am David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA Insider. In today's Locked on Jazz, we will look at three players who I watched last night. Aaron Gordon, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and Malik Monk, and explain why they represent why rebuilding a franchise is so crazy hard, like what the Jazz are embarking on, and what is the value for Lauri Markkanen down the stretch in these final 15 games as he was more active in practice yesterday. We'll have that for you as well. As I mentioned, I am David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA Insider. This is Locked on Jazz. It's a daily podcast in the Utah Jazz, give you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps. Thumbs up on YouTube's 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated. If you take the time to do so, I thank you. They help, and we appreciate you doing that. And for the everydayers out there, you're totally awesome. I greatly appreciate the fact that you tune in each and every day and are a part of this program. I am out of stickers, and I will try to find more. I hid them somewhere. Don't know where. You know that old thing where you put something in somewhere, and yeah, that whole thing. So anyway, to the latest reviews that have come in, thank you to Telpod, and thank you to regular listener of the show. Seems to be a mantra of Locked on Jazz Daily Listens. It's so appreciate very much those mentions that came in. Even if someone gave me a 3-star review instead of a 5-star. At least took the time to review it. I think that. Too bad. All right. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Get to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code all lowercase LockedOnNBA, default match up to 100. So I watched two games last night, which was nice. I don't usually, usually you're watching off to the side because you're prepping for a game, but we had this 2-day off little break here with Atlanta tomorrow. And so we got to watch Denver, Miami, and watch Sacramento beat the Lakers, which is always nice. And something struck me. Actually, Rui Hachimura fit into this as well. Here's what's so difficult about a rebuild. Is there are a bunch of players in the NBA who play really well when they're surrounded by really good players. They're not made to be a top 10 or top 20 player in the NBA. But they're vital to you winning a title, vital to you being a top team. And they're probably can be at a peak, a top 50 or top 70 or top 100 player. And they make you way better. But when they're on your roster and you're in the midst of a rebuild and you don't have a top 10 or a top 20, then you overstretch them and they don't look very good. Yet the truth is they're the actual exact player that you're going to have to be successful. And yet, because you've overstretched them, because you've gotten them through your development stage, because you've got them at the moment when they're probably learning the most and maybe the least ready, you actually sour on them and decide they're not good enough. Well, they're not good enough for what your franchise needs in its current state, but they are good enough. And what ends up happening is you get off them and you get nothing. So let's look at 4 guys. Rui Hachimura can be the 4th. Aaron Gordon's drafted by the Orlando Magic with the 4th pick of the 2014 NBA draft. He's 19 years old. He's spent a single year at the University of Arizona. He's incredibly gifted. He's 6'8", 235. And Orlando is terrible. Okay? Orlando at this point is 25-57, and they fire Jacques Vaughn, and James Borrega takes over halfway through. And Aaron Gordon's rookie year, he's playing actually with some half-decent players, so it's surprising how bad they are. But he's not ready at all. So he's 19 years old. He plays 47 games. Just to give you the run for the Magic, they then win 35, they then win 29, they then win 25, they then get up to 42 and lose in the first round of a playoff series. Then they win 33, actually out of 73. And then they decide at that point, then the next year, they're bad again. So they're generally terrible for this whole run with Aaron Gordon. And at this point, in the next season, they halfway through the year quit on Aaron Gordon. And they trade him. And at that point, Aaron Gordon is 25 years old. He's averaging 12 or 14 points a game. And he get 3 assists and 6-7 rebounds. And we can list all of the things he doesn't do well. He hasn't developed into a star. He was supposed to be a 4th pick of the draft. He hasn't been that guy. He, frankly, at this point, when I'm watching him, has terrible time and score understanding because he actually is a really interesting conversation I had with a scout about him as I was talking about when somebody asked whether somebody should acquire him. And I was like, he just doesn't understand the game, dude. And they're like, well, why do you say that? And I told a story about when we played them and Orlando was on like an 8-0 run. Vucevic scored 6 of the 8, Nikola Vucevic. And he got a rebound and brought the ball up and pulled for 3 on a no-pass possession in semi-transition as a career like 28% three-point shooter. He missed it. His whole entire team's energy dropped. We grabbed the rebound, went down and scored. We were down like 6. We got it to 4. We went on like a 10-2 run because they quit because they were like, why did you take that shot? And we went and won the game. And to me, it was a sign of his complete lack of understanding. And the scout I was talking to said, yeah, he thinks he's the best player on the team. And I thought about it, and I was like, well, he might have been the best player on the team. Or at least I get, this game was probably in the 1920 season. He looked at that roster, and he looked at it, and he said, okay, Nikola Vucevic, Evan Fournier, Jonathan Isaac, Markelle Fultz, Terrence Ross, I'm the best player on this team. I was drafted 4th. I'm the best player on this team. And so on an 8-0 run, I have every right to go take that 3. So Orlando has Aaron Gordon, and now they're frustrated because he thinks he's the best player on the team. He's not a best player on the team. They're frustrated with him. They can't win. He's been the headliner. So then they give up on him. And they move off of him. Because the fans are frustrated. The franchise is frustrated. Aaron's frustrated. And what do they get for him? They get R.J. Hampton, Gary Harris, and a 2025 first-round pick, which frankly will probably be the last pick of the first round. They got nothing. Gary Harris is a nice player, but they got nothing. And now the 4th pick of their draft in 2014 is in Denver, and he's absolutely everything you need out of a championship player. He compliments Jokic. He plays behind the scenes. He clearly understands he's the 3rd best player on the team. He's terrific. He guards the best guys. He rebounds. He runs. He's not any different. But in the landscape of a rebuild, he wasn't good enough. He wasn't good enough to be the man. He thought he was the man. He got treated as the man. He's the 4th pick of the draft. So he played that way, and he wasn't good enough. I fell for it too. Orlando, fan base, coaches, everyone soured and then moved him. Because he's frustrated, they're frustrated with him, and they get nothing for him. But the fact is, on an Orlando team with Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner, Aaron Gordon would be awesome. In fact, on every championship team, Aaron Gordon would be awesome. Doesn't shoot it great. Only 29% from 3. That's his weakness. Cuts beautifully, slices, learned how to play off others, and he's fabulous. But the essence of what's hard about a rebuild is that on that team, when they're not very good and they draft him and they want him to be something, what you want when you're in a rebuild is you want to find your top 20 and your top 10 and your top 20 player. And then when you get a top 50 and he's not a top 10 or a top 20, he's not good enough and you get frustrated and you give up on him. Aaron Gordon's the most extreme example because he's a top 50. But this is true if you draft a guy and they become a top 70. You do the same thing. And we'll talk about that when we continue here on today's edition of Locked on Jazz. We're just getting started. Today's edition of Locked on Jazz is brought to you by Intercap Lending. Steve Carter over Intercap is just amazing. He's seriously, without question, the best customer service person I've ever dealt with in my entire life. And that is why Intercap has stayed a sponsor this long, and that's why Steve Carter continues to wow everyone that deals with it. Intercap Lending is your local lending company. It's a difficult time, and Steve Carter's our own personal loan officer. Here's what Eric Goswald said. Working with Steve was just a pleasure as he handled all aspects of our loan with efficiency, competency. Any questions were promptly answered, and he took extra time to be certain we understood the process. We felt very cared for by Steve and the rest of the Intercap team. We highly recommend Steve. We'll certainly use Steve for any leading in the future. Alex Kiro, great lender to work with. Steve is super accessible. Communicate. He answers the phone at any hour of the day and helps you with whatever you need. Would highly recommend. The best part about Steve is when I've dealt with him twice on 2 loans. Is it honestly, you know what your feeling is when you're dealing with him? Is that he wants to do well for you. Like that his excitement and what he enjoys the most is doing well for you, which I find, very, very kind of stimulating, like awesome that someone takes their job that seriously and loves it that much. So tip of the hat to Steve Carter and Intercap Lending. Intercap Lending has been a sponsor of us for a while. If you want to get a hold of Steve, feel free to text or email me at dlock09@gmail.com. That's dlock09@gmail.com. That's dlock09@gmail.com. And we will hook up you with Steve Carter as soon as we possibly can. We absolutely promise to do that for you with Steve Carter over at Intercap Lending. I trust me. He's just simply the best. Today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the daily fantasy sports game. You, not against the experts, not against the sharks, just picking more or less. That's what makes it so great. Prize Picks is the #1 fantasy sports app with over 3 million members. You pick more or less than 2 or 6 star projections. And right now it's Demons and Goblins, the newest and most exciting way to play. Squares marked with red demons or green goblins give you different payouts. So you can pay up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. It is all over at prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. And with that promo code LockedOnNBA, you get a first deposit match up to $100. That's LockedOnNBA. First deposit match up to $100. prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. From Aaron Gordon, we move to another member of the Denver Nuggets, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. By the way, Locked On has launched the first ever 24/7 sports channel on YouTube. It's pretty great. And this gets even more exciting. On March 20th at 7 p.m. from 7 to 10 Eastern, baseball fans, mark your calendar because we are doing the best MLB preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. That's March 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern. Get the first local insight on the upcoming MLB season. Find it March 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern on Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or on your free Amazon Fire TV channel app. That's Locked On Sports Today, March 20th, 7 p.m. for the MLB preview. Okay, so let's go to Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Detroit drafts him in the 2013 draft, the year after Aaron Gordon, with the 8th pick. They get ridiculed for not taking Trey Burke, if you recall. And Kentavious Caldwell-Pope he's 20 years old. He has a quiet first season in the NBA. And then, as we talked about yesterday on the show, guys who don't have good first years have good second years. He averages 13 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists. And then in his next year, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope averages 14 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists. He's really good. He's really, really good. And Detroit that year Detroit in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope's opening years wins 29 games under Mo Cheeks and fires him his first year. Pretty good way to reoccurring theme on how to ruin the development of a rookie. Then they hire Stan Van Gundy and they go 32-50. Then Van Gundy gets them a lot better and they become 44-38. And then they slip back the other way, 37-45. And of course, now this has to be somebody's fault. Now they're frustrated, right? They've gone the wrong direction. They're not as good as they were. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was their 9th pick of the draft. He's only okay. He's shooting 39% from the field and 35% from three. And he's not going to be a marquee player. And he was their 9th pick. And so they trade him to the Los Angeles Lakers. Because in a rebuild, at this point, teams start to get frustrated. And as part of the trade, the Lakers, with Montrezl Harrell and Kyle Kuzma to Washington, Brooklyn traded Spencer Dinwiddie. It's like a complicated 8-team deal. And Detroit trades Kentavious Caldwell-Pope to the Lakers. And I can't figure out what Detroit got in this deal. I literally cannot figure out, having reread it today, what Detroit got in this deal. Indiana got trade exceptions. Washington got things. Cannot figure out what he got. It was a 5-team motherlode deal that involved the Lakers, the Wizards, the Nets, the Pacers, the Spurs, and somehow the Pistons, which is 6 players. Just literally, team tells you, I cannot figure out what they got out of him. And he signs a new contract with the Lakers for $17 million because Detroit just lets him go. I take it back. He wasn't part of it. And I wonder why Detroit. That was 2020, 2017, 2021. He's part of the Laker trade. My bad. I missed. No wonder I didn't understand it. I just realized that. So 4 years in, Detroit decides they've had enough of Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and he just signs with the Lakers for $17 million because they don't want to pay him. And Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is really good. He goes to the Lakers, who are good, and he becomes a valuable member of the team and a valuable member of their exactly what you're trying to build. He's a valuable member of a championship caliber team. Like, that's what he does. Like, they're not quite. He has the bubble year with the Lakers. He's voted top 10 defensive player of the year. He continues to average like 10 points a game. He's 3-point shooting now when he doesn't have the burden of being the main guy without guys around him, jumps from 30% and 34% to 38, 39, and 40%. Because Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is a top 70, a top 90 player, but when he's on Detroit, and Detroit's terrible, and he's playing 32 minutes a night, one, he thinks he's their best player because their best player is Reggie Jackson. And so he plays as though he thinks they're best player. He jacks a bunch of shots. He overdoes himself. He's not very good. And people get frustrated with him. But that's because that's not who he is. But he has no choice because he's the 9th pick and he's got the pressure. And that's what the hard thing about a rebuild is. And frankly, by the next year, he is their best player. And he's taking 13, 14 shots a game, unless you think Tobias Harris is better. They're about the same. And then it falls on him, and they knock him off. Malik Monk is the similar story. Malik Monk was the 11th pick by the Charlotte Hornets. And they get ridiculed because they took Donovan Mitchell. And he's 19 years old, and he goes to Charlotte, and he's 19 years old, and he averaged 7 points a game. And it's a reoccurring theme. And he's not quite ready yet. And Charlotte's terrible. And Steve Clifford's their head coach and coaches 36 games. They fire Steve Clifford and James Borrega takes over. I know it sounds super familiar. And then they win 39 and then they win 23 and then they win 33 because they're Charlotte. And yes, you go look down the roster. I'm not sure he thought he was the best player on the team because Terry Rozier, Gordon Hayward were on the team. And he's struggling to ever find his bearings. He's coming out the bench. He plays 4 games. Or he plays 4 seasons with him. He doesn't shoot it great. Final year, he shoots 40% from 3. And after 4 years, they have to make a decision on him, and they're disappointed, and this and that. And so they let him go, and the Lakers sign him. And the Lakers sign him for $1.7 million. Like, they literally let him go for nothing. And then Malik Monk spends 1 year there, and then he signs a $9 million, $10 million deal with Sacramento, and he's really, really good. He's really, really good. He's probably a top 100 player in the NBA. He's going to be the 6th man of the year this year. He's averaging 16 points, 3 rebounds, 5 assists. He busts 37% off the bench from 3. He's exactly the type of player you need on a winning team. This is the essence of what's the problem with a rebuild. Let's go to Rui Hachimura, 9th pick of a 2019 draft. Goes to Washington. First year, he's actually fine. He averages 14 points a game. He plays 48 games. He ends up having injuries, some leave issues. There's some kind of side notes on Rui Hachimura. Doesn't play a lot. I'm going to give Washington a little bit more of a pass here. But the same concept happens. And then they trade him for Kendrick Nunn, a 2023 second-round draft pick who they just signed it yesterday, a 2029 second, and a 2029 second. And that's it. And Washington gets nothing for their former 9th pick. And now Rui Hachimura is in LA on a pretty good team. He's not great. He's got little things that aren't great about him. Pretty good. 13 points, 4 rebounds, an assist. His three-point shooting's up to 42%. He plays off of LeBron and Anthony Davis beautifully. And if you go back and look at him in 2021, in his second year in the league, when he played 57 games and he started and he wasn't great, and you kind of get frustrated about him if you're a Washington Wizards fan because he's a little older and this and that, he overstretches himself because he was probably the second best player on that team. Bradley Beal's better than him. But then he was next. And he probably wasn't ready for that. So he didn't look good doing it. And then you get frustrated with him and you let him go. It's like the same story on all these guys. But Aaron Gordon, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Malik Monk, and Rui Hachimura all are valuable pieces on a championship team. And so this is the essence of what makes a rebuild so difficult. And we're going to go through it. We're going to draft a player, and our projection on them is going to be that they have to be a superstar because that's what we're desperately in need every day. It's all we talk about. We need a top 10, a top 20, a top 50 player. And we're going to have the top 70 or the top 80 or maybe the top 50. And we're going to get frustrated because we're asking them to be a top 10 or top 20, and they're not going to be able to do it. And then we're going to move them and get nothing for them if we follow the script of everyone else. But the good news is there's a sign Danny Ainge doesn't do that. We'll do that plus what Lauri Markkanen's value, the value of Lauri Markkanen is playing down the stretch here as we continue on Locked On Jazz. Today's show is brought to you in part by Nissan. NissanUSA.com. 3 beautiful new cars in the Nissan lineup. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect city drives and great escapes. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play are built right into the 12.3 HD touchscreen. And the 2024 Rogue is perfect mid-size crossover for your next adventure. 2024 Nissan Pathfinder has room up to 8, expansive cargo capacity, advanced available 4x4 capability. With 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds of towing, when adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. And 2024 Nissan Armada will change what you expect with a full-sized SUV. Picture a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury and style, tow bigger, and explore further in the 2024 Armada. Take the Nissan Rogue, the Pathfinder, or the Armada and go out and find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Today's show is also brought to you by Robinhood Retirement. This has got some interesting things to it, so let me see if I can make this make sense to you here with Robinhood. Robinhood, did you know, I guess the first question is, Robinhood wants you to know if you have a 401k, you can still have an IRA. So Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for retirement thanks to their IRA with 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees do apply. Let me give you some legal stuff. Claim of first quarter 1, 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRA and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year for a date. For up to 3% match, must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfer is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is registered broker dealer. That's Robinhood.com/boost. So here's the 1 ounce of good news. Not ounce, there's lots of ounces, but here's a note of good news for you on today's topic. If you look at the Boston Celtics and Danny Ainge's free agency or moves of the year, the one thing he did really interestingly in his builds with the Celtics is he found players who he liked that were in this mold and held on to them. 2 of them in particular are Kendrick Perkins and Marcus Smart. So if we go back and look at Dan in rebuilding with Doc Rivers from 04 through 07, 08, when they win the title and then have that little run, obviously the marquee guys are Ray Allen, who he acquired with a trade, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Rajon Rondo, who he drafted. But Kendrick Perkins is a pretty important piece on that team, and that's a player he drafted late in the first round who he felt had the mold and fit and did all the things that he wanted. Glenn Davis would be, Big Baby would be another one. When he does the second rebuild in 2013-14, and you look at the team that, 7 years makes the Eastern Conference Finals in 1920, and then loses to the Heat in that Eastern Conference Finals in Game 6, and then makes the finals years after, Marcus Smart is on that team. And so you have Jason Tatum, who he drafted 3, and Jaylen Brown, who he drafted 3, and Gordon Hayward, who he signed as a free agent, we're aware, and the various other pieces. But he also has Marcus Smart there, who was a 5th pick of a draft, and he kept him and saw his value as a top 50, top 70 player in the NBA to part of the championship composition. So let's hope that influence of Danny Ainge and his past history doing this can preclude the Jazz from having the same weak problems that we've seen with what I saw Aaron Gordon, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Malik Monk, Rui Hachimura, others. You just keep running the list. Lauri Markkanen participated somewhat in practice yesterday. I don't know that he will play on Friday. I don't know when he will play again. But I will tell you that there was just that kind of latest update yesterday was that Lauri went through partial practice. Taylor Hendricks went through full practice, and Jordan Clarkson did not participate in practice with a right groin strain. In regards to Lauri, Will was asked the other day whether there was still more for him to do this year, and the answer was yes. That they're really trying to develop Lauri in the next step of a player where they can just go in a key moment when you're on the wrong side of what's going to become a 20-0 run, that you can go give Lauri the ball in a spot and have him go get you a bucket or an opportunity or an advantage. And that, I think, is the next step for Lauri, is exactly that. Having him play another 10 games this season, getting the ball twice a quarter at the nail, at the elbow, going one-on-one and developing those skills. They probably are not most advantageous for us to win that given game, but they are most advantageous for us to be able to make plays, and learn how to develop Lauri into a top 20 player. Like, we're looking for a top 10, a top 20. We're back into this, and a top 50. Lauri, by the way, could probably fit some of this discussion where Chicago is in a rebuild and they're trying to force Lauri into being a top 10 or top 20. And what they had was a top 50, which would have been fine. And they didn't do it. And they got tired of it, and they got, bothered, and they got worn out, and they each got worn out with each other, and the relationship fell apart. And now Lauri's in Utah, and we're lucky. But that is the next step for Lauri. And that is the value of these final games for him, is trying to work on his isolation game. And not only just scoring out of it, but creating for others or reading the situation, or just some fundamentals like owning the space, learning how to get the advantage from a standstill. Lauri, that's probably the best way to say it. Lauri is terrific at getting an advantage off the move and off the ball. And he uses his picks and does a lot of great things. What are the things that Lauri can do to gain the advantage from a standstill position? Right? Go get him the ball. Give him the ball at a spot, have him create the opportunity, bring a second defender, kick to somebody, or score himself, or draw the foul. And so there is a value to that. On Jordan, the groin strain, I hope it's not problematic. He looks so frustrated on the floor right now. And I understand it has not been the greatest year for him. Part of me thinks Jordan needs him, just a break, just a reset. His body language is as frustrated as I've seen him in a long time. There's not actually, other than the love of the game, which Jordan loves more than anything, and being a leader, which he's been terrific at, and all of those kind of things, there from his individual skill development game, there actually is probably not a huge amount for Jordan to add right now. That's probably not a big. There's no developmental things at 30 plus years old for him. He's been, as Will talked about the other day, a wonderful culture piece, a wonderful piece. And so having him being around and being engaged is super important to the franchise and super important to the young guys. He just looks super frustrated right now. And that to me kind of jumped out the other night. Even like when he was playing well, he just kind of seems heavy to him right now. And I don't know if it's the losing. It probably is. He's super competitive. But I hope that maybe, the kind of old Buddhist adage, you don't know if it's good or if it's bad, that a groin strain for Jordan can kind of let him recenter himself for a second, be that great leader and beat clubhouse guy that he's been to this franchise all year. And then just, if he comes back this year, looks more like he loves the game. Because Jordan, that's the cool part. Jordan's just so cool. And the essence about him is that he is usually love it. And he brings a positive juice to everyone. And that's who Jordan Clarkson is. So I'm hoping it seems to me, I have not spent a lot of time with him on this homestand or been around him, but it just feels to me watching him from my perch in the arena that he doesn't seem to have that same level to him. So maybe just a few days off will get him to get fixed. It's hard. They're human, right? And Jordan's the coolest of the cool and just such a valuable piece. So it would be great if we could get that kind of positive mojo that Jordan brings to this team back to it. That is Locked On Jazz today. Jazz, Hawks, Quinn Snyder's return Friday. We'll do that. Plus, we'll probably do some Ask LOJ because we always do on Fridays, and you're so great with that. It's all coming up tomorrow on Locked On Jazz. Now we send you the first ever 24/7 national sports stream, Locked On Sports Today. It's also available on Amazon Fire TV. And remember, March 20th, 7 p.m., the Major League Baseball preview.